This is the last photo of Ruth Farrell just 30 minutes before the catastrophe. Imagine a 15-year-old girl smiling, posing at the base of the Big Dipper roller coaster. Half an hour later, she and 3 others would be dead when their cars plunged 35 feet to the ground. All because of one loose bolt that had long needed replacement. On the hot summer evening of July 24, 1930, Krug Park, Omaha, Nebraska's polite resort, was packed with visitors. For 15-year-old Ruth Farrell, a student at South High School, this was a long-awaited visit to the amusement park. The girl from a working-class Omaha family couldn't often afford such pleasures. Ruth was a diligent student who dreamed of getting an education after graduation. She had simple dreams: to find her way in life, get married, and have her own family. She lived with her parents not far from the park and often observed the rides from a distance, imagining the feeling of flying on the Big Dipper. That Thursday, the park hosted a corporate outing for employees of the Cudahy packing plant from South Omaha. Among them was 20-year-old Tony Politica, a young worker full of energy and enthusiasm. In another part of the park, 34-year-old Charles Stout, a cement company salesman, was enjoying the evening with a guest from Des Moines, 29-year-old Gladys Lundgren, who was visiting the Stout family. Fate would bring these 4 strangers together in a tragic finale. Eugene Lewis, the rear brakeman of the attraction, noticed something strange. "I was watching the train going up when I heard the timbers crack and saw the front car jump," he recalled later. The same attraction that had recently been declared safe by a city inspector was suddenly falling apart. One of the park employees had predicted that due to insufficient regular maintenance, a terrible accident would occur. And so it did. A brake shoe came loose from the cars, a part that should have been secured with 5 bolts, but only 2 were actually used. One of these bolts worked loose and fell off, causing the brake shoe to get stuck under the rear wheels of the first car. This forced the car off the tracks and into the wooden guardrails, which were so rotten they crumbled in one's fingers, as investigators later discovered. "I turned off the power, but the 9-foot flywheel was so heavy that it continued to pull the train, although the power was off," Lewis explained. The first car went off and slowly the others were pulled after it. The first 2 cars seemed to dangle for a second, then pulled the others after them. Since the cars weren't moving at full speed but were only climbing the incline, the 35-foot fall, about 10.7 meters, wasn't instantaneous. Passengers had time to realize what was happening as their cars began to fall. Screams of horror cut through the evening air, drowning out the laughter and joy in other parts of the park. The 4 cars crashed to the ground, flipping upside down. 3 seats were completely reduced to splinters. Passengers were trapped under the debris. Ruth Farrell died instantly, crushed under the weight of the car. Charles Stout, pinned under one of the cars, died 2 hours later at the hospital. Gladys Lundgren and Tony Politica died the next day from their injuries. Another 17 people were seriously injured, and only 2 of the 23 passengers escaped without harm. In the chaotic aftermath, park manager Jefferson Sampson rushed to his office to call ambulances, doctors, and notify the park's insurance company. Thousands of onlookers, drawn by the sirens of ambulances and fire trucks, flocked to the scene. Sampson and his staff tried to block reporters, and even a couple of policemen sent to make an official report. The reporters formed a phalanx, and the police gave ticket takers the choice: open the gates or risk arrest. Many in the crowd paid the 10-cent admission fee to gawk at the tragedy site up close. Reminiscent of the Titanic disaster, park management ordered Herb Fireman's orchestra to start playing, and the dance floor, located not far from the crash site, was comfortably filled 2 hours after the accident. Until City Council President John Hopkins ordered the park closed at 10:45 p.m. What if a more thorough inspection of the attraction had been conducted? What if all 5 bolts had been used to secure the brake shoes, as the design intended? What if the rotten wooden structures had been replaced in time? These questions tormented the minds of the relatives of the dead and injured. But there was another shocking twist to this tragedy. The investigation revealed that many wooden elements of the structure were in terrible condition. One of the crossbeams was so rotten that it could crumble in one's fingers. The left guide rail was splintered and torn away for 39 feet. Despite workers' warnings about the need for repairs, park management neglected safety in pursuit of profit. The consequences of the catastrophe were immediate and long-lasting. The very next day, 5 civil lawsuits were filed for a total of $188,000. In the end, 21 victims and families of the deceased were paid about $15,000 from the initially awarded $128,250. Only $30,000 was available from the park's liability insurance, and $5,000 from additional funds contributed by park shareholders. Doctors' and lawyers' fees were deducted from this amount. The Omaha City Council immediately passed an ordinance banning roller coasters in the city, a ban that remains in effect to this day. The Big Dipper was never reopened and was demolished in 1932 when the park came under new management. For Ruth Farrell's family, the loss was irreplaceable. A young girl, full of hope and dreams, never got to realize them. Her classmates at South High held a memorial service, and the local newspaper published a touching obituary about a bright, promising flower cut down at the dawn of life. Krug Park continued to operate, but attendance dropped sharply after the incident. The new owners tried to regain public interest by building a 4,000-seat stadium for boxing and wrestling, but these attempts were unsuccessful. The park finally closed in 1940 during the Great Depression. Today, Gallagher Park stands in its place with baseball fields, a playground, and a swimming pool. The tragedy at Krug Park remains the deadliest roller coaster accident in U.S. history and reminds us of the importance of safety and proper maintenance in public recreation areas. This is the last photo of Tommy Coleman, taken 17 minutes before the catastrophe. Imagine a sunny day, a smile on the boy's face, joyful excitement. And absolutely no one suspects that soon a tragedy will occur that will forever change carnival entertainment in North Carolina. The summer of 1947 in Benson, North Carolina was particularly hot. 10-year-old Tommy Coleman had been counting the days until the annual fair. His parents, James and Elizabeth, worked on a tobacco farm not far from town. Tommy was their only child, a bright and curious boy with fiery red hair and a sprinkling of freckles. At school, he was considered one of the best students, and teachers noted his talent for mathematics. In his free time, he loved building model airplanes and dreamed of becoming a pilot one day. The Benson Fair was the main event of the year, with carousels, attractions, cotton candy, and homemade lemonade. But the most impressive feature for all the children was the giant Ferris wheel, the symbol of the festival, installed right in the center of the square. On that day, July 15, 1947, Tommy finally persuaded his parents to let him ride the wheel by himself. James Coleman gave his son a quarter for a ticket and photographed him with an old Kodak camera. This was the last photograph of Tommy. In 17 minutes, the irreparable would happen. After 2 rotations on the Ferris wheel, Tommy secured a spot in the very top cabin. He felt on top of the world. The entire town of Benson was visible ahead, with its small houses and tobacco fields stretching to the horizon. He waved to his parents standing below. At this moment, the wheel operator heard a strange metallic sound. Witnesses later reported that at first, there was just a quiet ringing, as if something had come loose. Then came a sharp snap. The chain holding Tommy's cabin suddenly broke. The safety mechanism that should have prevented the fall failed due to poor maintenance. The steel structure holding the cabin bent under the unexpected load. Doris Haynes, a witness to the incident, told the local newspaper, "I heard the sound of tearing metal. Turning around, I saw the boy clutching the handrails. His eyes were wide open with terror." The cabin tilted at an angle of almost 45 degrees. Tommy desperately clung to the metal handrail, but his small hands couldn't hold his body weight for long. The crowd below froze in shock. Tommy's mother screamed. His father rushed to the base of the wheel. But no one could do anything. A few moments later, the boy lost his grip. The fall from a height of about 20 feet, approximately 6 meters, ended with an impact on the metal platform at the base of the attraction. When people ran to him, Tommy was unconscious. Local doctor William Harrison arrived at the scene within 10 minutes, but all he could do was confirm a severe head injury and multiple fractures. Tommy was urgently transported to Johnston County Hospital, where he remained in critical condition. What became a real shock for everyone? 3 days after the incident, it was discovered that the Ferris wheel had not undergone proper safety inspection since 1941, before the war began. The attraction operator company, Southern Amusements, had been cutting corners on maintenance. The post-accident inspection revealed that the chain mechanism had significant wear, and several links were on the verge of breaking. The Coleman family received the terrible news on the 4th day. Their son would not come out of the coma. Tommy passed away on July 19, 1947, without regaining consciousness. He was only 10 years old. This incident sparked a wave of public outrage. During the following year, the North Carolina legislature passed Tommy's Law, the state's first strict rules for inspecting attractions. The document required all carousels and Ferris wheels to be checked every 6 months and established safety standards for fair entertainments. The most tragic aspect of this story was that the accident was completely preventable. According to reports presented in court, the attraction manager had noticed problems with the chain mechanism on the morning of the tragedy, but decided that the wheel would hold until the end of the fair. After Tommy's funeral, his parents left Benson, unable to walk past the site of their son's death every day. They moved to Raleigh, where James found work at an automobile factory. The annual Benson Fair was canceled for 3 years after the incident. When it resumed in 1950, the Ferris wheel was replaced with a modern model with improved safety mechanisms. Today, Tommy's Law is considered one of the country's first regulatory acts to seriously impact safety standards for entertainment attractions. The story of the little boy who dreamed of the sky led to thousands of other children being protected from a similar fate. This is the last photo of Margaret Wilson, taken 18 minutes before the disaster. Imagine, you're laughing, enjoying the summer carnival, and in an instant, your world turns upside down as a ton of metal breaks loose and flies directly at you. The summer of 1955 in Omaha, Nebraska was particularly hot. The city carnival had become a long-awaited event for locals, offering temporary relief from the heat and routine. Among the visitors was 28-year-old Margaret Wilson, a nurse from the local hospital, who had come to the carnival with her younger sister Catherine after a hard work week. Margaret had always been characterized by her care for others. Growing up in a small house on the outskirts of Omaha, she had dreamed of becoming a nurse and helping people since childhood. After getting her education, she got a job at the city hospital, where she quickly earned the respect of colleagues for her professionalism and kindness. On rare weekends, Margaret loved spending time with her sister, attending city events. That day, July 16, 1955, they arrived at the carnival around 4 in the afternoon. Bright lights, the smell of cotton candy and popcorn, screams and laughter created an atmosphere of carefree fun. After taking a few photos for memory, the sisters decided to ride one of the most popular attractions, the Tilt-A-Whirl. "Come on, it'll be fun," Catherine insisted. And Margaret, although not a big fan of spinning rides, agreed. At 4:42 p.m., The sisters took seats in one of the 7 cars of the attraction, an oval structure resembling half an egg. Margaret sat on the left, Catherine on the right. A young man named John Parker, a local mechanic from an auto repair shop, joined them in the car. The only protection was a simple metal bar that the operator lowered in front of them. The ride operator, 43-year-old Frank Dawson, had been working at carnivals for over 15 years. Tired from a long shift on a hot day, he performed only a superficial inspection of the mechanisms before launching another cycle. The investigation later showed that this was the fatal mistake. At 4:45 p.m., the ride began to move. The platform slowly started spinning, gaining speed, and the cars began to rotate on their axes, creating a sense of chaotic movement. The first 2 minutes went normally. Margaret, with her eyes closed, held tightly onto the handrail while her sister excitedly screamed at each turn. In the 3rd minute, John Parker was the first to notice something was wrong. During another turn, he heard a metallic screech and felt the car jerk unnaturally. "Something's wrong!" he shouted, but his voice was drowned out by the carnival noise and screams of other passengers. At 4:49 p.m., after 4 minutes of operation, disaster struck. The main pin securing the car to the rotating platform completely disconnected. Technical reports later showed that it was worn and had not been replaced since the ride was installed. The pin finally broke during a strong jerk during a turn. The car, with 3 passengers, broke free from its moorings and, continuing to spin by inertia, crashed into a neighboring car, bounced off, and flew toward the metal fence. The impact was so powerful that the safety bar inside the car bent, hitting Margaret and John. "I heard a deafening clang, and then everything spun even faster," Catherine later recalled. "Margaret was screaming, metal was screeching, and I thought we were going to die." Frank Dawson, seeing the detached car, immediately pressed the emergency stop button, but it was too late. Momentum continued to carry the car until it finally stopped, crashing into the fence. When the ride stopped, witnesses saw a shocking sight. A bent car lay on the ground 3 meters from the main platform. Inside were the injured Margaret and John, whom Catherine was trying to help get out. Margaret suffered a serious chest contusion and a laceration on her forehead from hitting the metal handrail. John Parker suffered from a severe blow to his shoulder and back. By some miracle, Catherine escaped with only minor bruises and scratches. The alarm sounded at 4:51 p.m. The carnival's medical team arrived at the scene within a minute, and an ambulance arrived 7 minutes later. Margaret and John were taken to the city hospital, where Margaret had worked the morning shift that very day. The twist in this story is that 2 weeks before the incident, technician Robert Mills, who was conducting a routine inspection of carnival rides, noted in his report that the mounting pins on the Tilt-A-Whirl show signs of wear and require replacement within the next 30 days. However, the carnival management decided to postpone repairs until the end of the season to avoid losing profits during the peak summer months. This report was discovered during the investigation, leading to a lawsuit against the ride's owner company. After the incident, the Tilt-A-Whirl was closed indefinitely. The investigation revealed serious violations in the technical maintenance of the ride. Sellner Manufacturing, which created the Tilt-A-Whirl, issued updated safety instructions and mandatory inspection requirements for all owners of such attractions across the country. For Margaret Wilson, this day changed her entire life. After being discharged from the hospital, she experienced severe pain and post-traumatic stress. Despite this, she returned to work a month later, but never again visited carnival rides. Her experience as both a nurse and a victim motivated her to become an activist for the safety of entertainment events. John Parker, the second victim, recovered faster, but the story had an unexpected turn for him. During rehabilitation, he often saw Margaret at the hospital, and a friendship developed between them, which later grew into a romantic relationship. 2 years later, they were married, and in the wedding photos, the scar on Margaret's forehead served as a constant reminder of that fateful day. The Omaha incident of 1955 became one of the key events that led to enhanced safety measures on mobile attractions across America. In subsequent years, stricter inspection and maintenance rules were introduced, and protective mechanisms for passengers were improved. What if Robert Mills had insisted on immediate repairs? What if Frank Dawson had more carefully inspected the ride before launching it? The lives of 3 people could have turned out very differently. Every time you sit on a carnival ride, remember, your safety stands on lessons learned at the cost of injuries and lives of people like Margaret Wilson from Omaha. This was the last photo of 7-year-old Michael Rogers, just minutes before the accident that would change safety standards across America's fairgrounds forever. Imagine, one moment, a smiling boy fulfilling his dream of riding the fastest horse on a vintage carousel. The next, falling through the air as the wooden horse he sat upon suddenly broke free from its moorings. The Rogers family had driven nearly 70 miles from Dayton to spend the day at the Ohio State Fair. Thomas Rogers, an engineer at a local factory, and his wife Elizabeth had been planning this visit for weeks. For their only son Michael, who dreamed of becoming an astronaut, it was a special day, a reward for his excellent grades at the end of the school year. In his shirt pocket was a small rocket model he had brought to show how I'll fly to the stars. They arrived at the fair early in the morning, spending hours viewing agricultural exhibits, trying cotton candy, and hot dogs. By midday, they reached the midway, flashing lights, music, and laughter creating an atmosphere of carefree enjoyment. "I want to ride the horses!" Michael exclaimed, pointing to the vintage Herschel Spillman carousel, its wooden figures gleaming with fresh paint under the midday sun. Elizabeth smiled as she watched her son select a black and white steed with a flowing mane. "This one's the fastest," he declared, with the certainty only children possess. Thomas took several photos with his new Kodak Brownie, capturing the moment as Michael climbed onto his wooden horse. "Hold tight, astronaut," he called out, waving to his son who responded with a wide grin, revealing a recently lost baby tooth. The carousel began to move, the melodic tunes of the mechanical organ filling the air. Michael held tightly to the metal pole, his eyes sparkling with excitement as the carousel gained speed. On the second rotation, his horse began to rise and fall in rhythm with the melody. His parents, standing by the railing, waved each time their son passed by. Suddenly, there was a loud metallic snap. In the next moment, the wooden horse beneath Michael tilted at an odd angle, the metal pin connecting it to the ride mechanism having broken after decades of use. In horror, Michael slid sideways, his small hands desperately trying to maintain his grip. Before the eyes of dozens of fairgoers, he fell from a height of approximately 5 feet. "Stop the ride!" Elizabeth screamed over the music. The ride operator immediately hit the emergency stop. Thomas had already jumped over the fence, making his way to his son lying on the wooden platform. Michael was crying, clutching his right arm which was bent at an unnatural angle. Witnesses later recounted that the sound of the fall was muffled by the music, but the child's scream was heard by all. One of the witnesses, Margaret Wilson, a nurse from a local hospital, rushed to help. "Don't move him," she instructed the parents, carefully examining the boy. "Looks like a broken arm and possible concussion." The fair staff called an ambulance, which arrived within 7 minutes. While paramedics prepared Michael for transport, Ride Safety Inspector Harold Jenkins was already examining the failed horse. "Metal fatigue," he muttered, showing the broken pin to a colleague. "This shouldn't have happened. We checked all the fittings a week ago." At Columbus Children's Hospital, Michael was diagnosed with a compound fracture of his right arm and a mild concussion. Dr. Richard Green, the attending physician, later noted in his report, "The boy was lucky. A fall from such a height could have resulted in much more serious injuries." What makes this incident particularly disturbing is that the Herschel Spillman Carousel had been operating at the Ohio State Fair since 1935, passing annual technical inspections. As the subsequent investigation revealed, the metal pins had never been completely replaced, They were only inspected for visible defects. Engineer James Hawkins, who conducted the investigation, discovered microfractures in other similar pins, invisible to the naked eye, but potentially lethal. "This was an accident waiting to happen," he said in an interview with the Columbus Dispatch. "Had it not been for this incident, we might have faced a much more serious catastrophe in the future." Following the incident, all rides at the fair underwent additional inspection, and the carousel remained closed for the remainder of the season. The Ohio Department of Agriculture, responsible for ride safety, revised its inspection and maintenance rules. The Rogers family filed a lawsuit against the carousel operator, Sunshine Amusements. The case was settled out of court for an undisclosed amount which, according to insiders, was directed toward Michael's education fund. But what if the pin had broken when the carousel was moving at full speed? What if Michael had fallen not onto the wooden platform, but onto the metal mechanisms beneath it? These questions haunted amusement ride safety specialists. Michael Rogers recovered physically, though the psychological scars lasted much longer. In a rare interview 3 years later, Elizabeth Rogers revealed, "He still won't go near carousels. When we drive past the fairgrounds, he looks away." Interestingly, this case led to important changes in the industry. In 1963, Ohio became one of the first states to adopt comprehensive safety standards for traveling amusements. Pins and fasteners now required complete replacement every 5 years, regardless of their visible condition. The 1962 Ohio State Fair incident became a turning point in the history of amusement ride safety in America, a quiet revolution that began with a broken pin and a frightened child. This is the last photo of Robert Collins taken just 15 minutes before the fatal accident at Lincoln Park's bumper car attraction. Imagine, a regular Sunday afternoon turned into a nightmare when a simple electrical fault sent 110 volts of deadly current through the metal frame of a bumper car, claiming the life of a young man with his whole future ahead of him. In the summer of 1939, Robert Collins was like many other 19-year-olds in America. The son of Irish immigrants, he had grown up in a working-class neighborhood not far from Lincoln Park's entrance gates. His father worked at the steel mill, and his mother took in washing to help make ends meet. Despite the lingering effects of the Great Depression, Robert had managed to secure a position as an apprentice electrician at a local company, showing considerable promise in his field. Robert was known for his quick smile and easygoing nature. Friends described him as someone who lit up a room when he entered. He had graduated from Lincoln Technical High School just the year before, where he had been popular among classmates and teachers alike. His girlfriend, Mary Donovan, had been dating him for nearly 2 years, and there were whispers among their friends that an engagement might be on the horizon. That fateful Sunday, August 20th, 1939, had started like any other summer weekend. Robert met his friends James Wilson and Thomas Burke at the park entrance at 1 p.m. The three had been planning this visit all week, saving their hard-earned money for an afternoon of thrills and entertainment. The weather was perfect, sunny with a slight breeze that offered relief from the August heat. The trio spent their first hours enjoying various attractions, including the carousel and several carnival games. Robert had won a small teddy bear at the ring toss, planning to give it to Mary later that evening when they were scheduled to meet for dinner. Around 3:30 p.m., James suggested they try the bumper cars, one of the park's most popular attractions that had been installed just 2 years prior. The bumper car pavilion was crowded that day. Electric lights flashed around the perimeter of the track as the operator collected tickets from eager patrons. The cars themselves were a marvel of modern engineering for the time. Metal-framed vehicles powered by electricity conducted through the metal ceiling grid and floor plates. At approximately 3:45 p.m., Robert, James, and Thomas climbed into separate bumper cars, with Robert choosing a red car near the center of the arena. Witnesses would later recall that Robert seemed in high spirits, laughing as he adjusted himself in the seat and gripped the steering wheel. The photograph that would become his last was snapped by a park photographer just moments before the ride began. When the operator activated the power, the bumper cars lurched to life, and participants began the chaotic but fun process of steering into each other. For about 2 minutes, everything proceeded normally. Then, disaster struck. According to the subsequent investigation, a faulty wire in the electrical system had been rubbing against the metal frame of Robert's car. The insulation had worn away over time, creating a dangerous situation where the car's metal frame became electrified. The rubber tires that would normally provide insulation from the electrified floor had developed a small leak, allowing the current to find a path to ground, directly through Robert's body. Witnesses described the horrifying moment when Robert's body suddenly stiffened, his hands clenching the metal steering wheel. His friend James, initially thinking Robert was playing a joke, bumped his car from behind. When Robert didn't respond, James quickly realized something was terribly wrong. The ride operator, 32-year-old Harold Jenkins, noticed the commotion and immediately shut down the power to the attraction. By then, it was already too late. Robert had received a massive electrical shock, the current entering through his hands and exiting through his feet into the floor of the ride. Park medical staff were on the scene within minutes, but their efforts to revive the young man were unsuccessful. Robert Collins was pronounced dead at 4:17 p.m. The cause of death later determined to be electrocution. He was just 3 months shy of his 20th birthday. The aftermath of the tragedy sent shockwaves through the community. Lincoln Park was temporarily closed pending a full safety investigation. The local newspaper, the Daily Chronicle, ran the headline, "Youth Dies in Park Tragedy," on its front page the following morning, sending ripples of concern through parents of teenagers who frequented the attraction. The investigation revealed several critical safety issues. The bumper car ride had passed a routine inspection just 3 weeks earlier, but inspectors had failed to identify the worn insulation on the wiring. Additionally, the ride lacked proper grounding systems that might have prevented the fatal accident. The manufacturer of the ride, Thrill-O-Rama Attractions, initially denied responsibility, claiming the park's maintenance team had failed to follow proper upkeep procedures. The most shocking revelation came when former park employee Edward Martinez came forward with information that he had reported concerns about the electrical systems on the bumper cars twice in the month before the accident, but management had allegedly dismissed his warnings as excessive caution. Robert's family filed a lawsuit against both Lincoln Park and Thrill-O-Rama Attractions. The case would eventually settle out of court for an undisclosed sum, but the legal proceedings led to significant changes in amusement park safety regulations across the state. New guidelines mandated more frequent electrical inspections, improved grounding systems for all metal components on rides, and the installation of circuit breakers designed to cut power immediately if electrical faults were detected. The tragedy left a lasting impact on those who knew Robert. His girlfriend Mary never fully recovered from the shock of his sudden death. According to family members, she kept the teddy bear he had won that day on her dresser for the rest of her life. Robert's parents, devastated by the loss of their only son, used part of the settlement money to establish a scholarship fund in his name at Lincoln Technical High School, specifically for students pursuing careers in electrical engineering. A bittersweet tribute to the profession their son had been so passionate about. James Wilson, who witnessed his friend's death, later became an electrical safety inspector, dedicating his career to preventing similar tragedies. In a newspaper interview given on the 25th anniversary of the accident, Wilson stated, "Not a day goes by that I don't think about Rob and what happened. If my work prevents even one family from experiencing what the Collins family went through, then I've honored his memory." Lincoln Park's bumper car attraction remained closed for nearly a year after the incident, while extensive safety modifications were implemented. When it reopened in the summer of 1940, attendance was initially low as the memory of the tragedy remained fresh in the public mind. Gradually, as new safety measures became evident, patrons returned, though many older community members would forever associate the ride with Robert's death. Perhaps the most significant legacy of this tragedy was the passage of the Amusement Ride Safety Act of 1941, which established the first comprehensive safety standards for traveling carnivals and permanent amusement parks throughout the region. The act specifically addressed electrical safety requirements and mandated independent inspections of all rides on a quarterly basis. Today, more than 8 decades later, modern bumper car rides bear little resemblance to their 1930s counterparts. Sophisticated circuit protection, insulated components, and regular safety inspections have made such accidents extremely rare. Yet the story of Robert Collins serves as a sobering reminder of the vital importance of safety regulations and the human cost of their absence. As we enjoy the thrills of amusement parks today, few of us stop to consider the tragedies that have shaped the safety measures we now take for granted. Robert Collins never lived to see the changes his death would inspire. But his story continues to be taught in safety training programs for amusement park operators. A tragic, but important chapter in the evolution of entertainment safety standards. What if the park management had heeded Edward Martinez's warnings? What if the inspection had been more thorough? What if the grounding system had been properly designed? These questions haunt the story of the Lincoln Park tragedy, a stark reminder that behind every safety regulation is often the story of someone who wasn't protected by it. This is the last photo of 12-year-old Sarah Mitchell, just 15 minutes before the playground accident that would change her life forever. Imagine, a sunny afternoon in 1951, laughter filling the air as children play, unaware that in moments, a faulty metal ladder would collapse beneath a young girl's feet, sending her crashing to the hard ground below. Sarah Mitchell was the type of girl who made friends easily. Growing up in the small town of Benson, Arizona in the post-war years, Sarah was known for her infectious laugh and adventurous spirit. The second daughter of Robert Mitchell, who worked at the local hardware store, and Mary Mitchell, a homemaker who volunteered at the school library, Sarah had a simple but happy childhood. Like most children in Benson, Sarah spent her free time outdoors. The town had limited entertainment options in 1951, but the elementary school playground was a popular gathering spot. Sarah particularly loved reading. She'd often bring along her favorite Nancy Drew mystery to the playground, finding a quiet spot to read between rounds of active play with friends. That fateful day, May 17, 1951, began like any other spring day in Benson. The temperature had reached the mid-80s by noon, typical for southern Arizona in late spring. Sarah had asked her mother if she could meet friends at the school playground after lunch. "Be home by 4, her mother reminded her as Sarah rushed out the door, brown pigtails bouncing with each step. The playground at Benson Elementary was simple by today's standards. A few swings with metal chains, a seesaw, and the pride of the playground. A metal slide installed just 5 years earlier as part of post-war community improvements. The slide stood about 8 feet tall, with a steep metal ladder leading to the top. Unlike modern equipment, this ladder had minimal safety features, just metal rungs attached to the main frame, with no protective cage or adequate handrails. At approximately 2:30 p.m., Sarah's friend Jane Cooper took a photograph of Sarah at the playground with her new Kodak Brownie camera, a cherished birthday gift. In the photo, Sarah is smiling broadly, her hand raised in a cheerful wave, standing near the base of the slide. Behind her, other children wait their turn to climb. This would be the last photo taken of Sarah before the accident. 15 minutes later, Sarah was climbing the ladder to the slide when disaster struck. According to witness accounts from other children present, Sarah had reached about halfway up the ladder when they heard a loud cracking sound. The connecting bolts on the left side of the ladder, weakened by years of exposure to Arizona's harsh sun and occasional rainstorms, suddenly gave way. "It happened so fast," recalled Betty Williams, who was 10 years old at the time and waiting for her turn behind Sarah. One minute Sarah was climbing up, and the next there was this awful metal sound, and she was falling. The ladder collapse sent Sarah tumbling approximately 4 feet to the hard-packed dirt below. Unlike modern playgrounds with rubber or wood chip surfaces designed to absorb impact, the Benson Elementary Playground of 1951 had no such safety features. Sarah landed awkwardly, the full weight of her body crashing onto her right leg. The sound of Sarah's scream brought the playground to a standstill. Mrs. Eleanor Davis, a teacher who was supervising the playground that afternoon, rushed to Sarah's side. The young girl's right leg was bent at an unnatural angle, a compound fracture of both the tibia and fibula, with the bone visibly protruding through the skin. "Hold on, Sarah," Mrs. Davis said, trying to keep the girl calm while sending another child to the school office to call for help. In the small town of Benson, emergency services were limited in 1951. The school secretary called Dr. James Wilson, the town's general practitioner, who arrived within 10 minutes. He quickly assessed that Sarah needed hospital treatment in Tucson, some 45 miles away. Sarah's parents were contacted, and her father arrived at the school in his pickup truck. With no ambulance available, Dr. Wilson stabilized Sarah's leg as best he could, and she was carefully placed in the back of the truck on a makeshift bed of blankets. Her father drove as smoothly as possible on the rough roads to Tucson General Hospital, while her mother held her hand, trying to distract her from the pain. At the hospital, X-rays confirmed multiple fractures to Sarah's right leg. The compound nature of the break required surgery to set the bones properly and prevent infection. Sarah spent 3 days in the hospital before returning home to Benson with her leg in a full cast from hip to ankle. What many don't know is that the slide ladder at Benson Elementary had actually been flagged for repair just 2 weeks before the accident. A school maintenance report dated May 3, 1951 noted, "Loose bolts on slide ladder, requires tightening or replacement." However, with limited maintenance staff and resources in the small district, the repair had been scheduled for the summer break, just 3 weeks too late for Sarah. The accident had far-reaching consequences. Sarah's recovery was long and painful. She spent 8 weeks in a full leg cast, followed by another 6 weeks in a walking cast. Physical therapy wasn't widely available in rural Arizona in the 1950s. So Sarah's rehabilitation consisted mainly of exercises her mother learned from a pamphlet provided by the hospital. The injury left Sarah with a permanent limp and recurring pain that would follow her into adulthood. Her dream of becoming a physical education teacher was replaced with a new path. She eventually became a librarian, inspired by the books that kept her company during her recovery. For the town of Benson, the accident sparked immediate change. Within a week, the school board held an emergency meeting to address playground safety. The damaged slide was removed entirely. More significantly, the incident prompted the first playground safety inspection program in the district, with quarterly checks of all equipment mandated. Parents across town began questioning the safety of all playground equipment. A committee was formed to raise funds for playground improvements, eventually resulting in the installation of new equipment with improved safety features by the spring of 1952. Though primitive by today's standards, the new playground included swing chains with protective covers, slides with enclosed ladders, and the addition of sand pits under climbing equipment to soften falls. Sarah's accident also rippled beyond Benson. The Arizona State School Board Association featured the incident in their fall 1951 newsletter, using it as a cautionary tale to encourage other districts to implement regular safety inspections. Several neighboring counties subsequently adopted similar inspection protocols. What makes Sarah's story particularly poignant is how preventable the accident was. The maintenance report clearly identified the problem, but limited resources and the lack of urgency, a reflection of the times when playground safety was not a priority, created the perfect conditions for tragedy. Today, playground equipment is subject to rigorous safety standards set by the Consumer Product Safety Commission, standards that didn't exist in 1951. Modern slides feature enclosed ladders with guardrails, impact-absorbing surfaces underneath, and regular safety inspections. Sarah Mitchell recovered from her physical injuries, though she walked with a slight limp for the rest of her life. She remained in Benson, working as the town librarian until her retirement in 1995. When interviewed for the town's centennial celebration in 2000, Sarah reflected on her accident with remarkable grace. What happened to me helped make playgrounds safer for generations of children in Benson. If my broken bones meant other children didn't have to break theirs, then some good came from that day. The rusty bolts that failed that day in 1951 are preserved in the small Benson Historical Society Museum, a humble reminder of how far playground safety has come, and of the 12-year-old girl whose accident helped spark that change. This is the last photo of Robert Carson just 45 minutes before tragedy struck on Lake Manawa. Imagine a peaceful Sunday afternoon turning into a desperate fight for survival when the boat ride's restraining chain suddenly snapped, plunging him into the churning waters below. Robert Carson was 35 years old in the summer of 1942, a hardworking machinist at the Union Pacific Railroad shops in Omaha. Friends and family described him as a devoted father to his two young children, Sarah, 7, and Thomas, 5. His wife Eleanor worked part-time as a secretary at Mutual of Omaha, and the couple had recently celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary. Despite the backdrop of World War II and the rationing that affected everyday life, the Carsons were determined to enjoy simple pleasures whenever possible. On that fateful Sunday, July 12, 1942, Robert decided to treat his family to an afternoon at Lake Manawa, a popular recreation spot just across the Iowa border from Omaha. The weather was perfect, sunny with a gentle breeze, the kind of summer day that drew hundreds of families to the lake. The Carson family arrived around 2 p.m., joining friends from their church for a picnic by the shore. After lunch, Robert noticed the boat ride attraction that carried passengers on a circular route around the lake's central island. The ride, operated by Manawa Amusement Company since 1936, was especially popular during wartime when gasoline rationing limited other forms of recreation. Each boat was connected to a central mechanism by a heavy metal chain, keeping them on a predetermined path as they circled the lake. At approximately 3:15 p.m., Robert decided to take a ride alone while Eleanor supervised the children as they built sandcastles on the shore. He waved to them from the boat as it began its journey around the lake, smiling as his children excitedly waved back. A fellow passenger, Herbert Williams, would later recall Robert chatting pleasantly about his work at the railroad and his plans to volunteer for civil defense efforts. Witnesses reported that about 10 minutes into the ride, as the boat carrying Robert rounded the far side of the island, a loud metallic snap echoed across the water. The restraining chain connecting Robert's boat to the central mechanism had broken. A catastrophic equipment failure that immediately sent the vessel drifting uncontrolled toward deeper water. The boat operator, 19-year-old Jimmy Collins, immediately shut down the ride and signaled for help. Other boats were quickly dispatched, but by the time they reached the area, Robert's vessel had capsized in the choppy waters, stirred up by a sudden gust of wind. According to witnesses, Robert, who was not wearing a life vest as they weren't required by law in 1942, initially managed to stay afloat and attempted to swim toward shore. Park employee Frank Miller, who was among the first responders in a rescue boat, reported seeing Robert struggling about 30 yards from shore before disappearing beneath the surface. Despite immediate diving efforts by Miller and 2 off-duty firefighters who happened to be at the lake that day, Robert could not be located in the murky waters. The Omaha Fire Department's water rescue team arrived 20 minutes later and began a coordinated search. Robert's body was recovered at 5:42 p.m., nearly 2 hours after the accident. Medical examiner Dr. Harold Jenkins determined the cause of death to be accidental drowning. The investigation that followed revealed critical safety issues with the boat ride. County Inspector William Harrison found that the chain that broke showed significant rust and wear that should have been detected during routine maintenance. Inspection records indicated the ride had last been examined in April 1941, over a year before the accident, as wartime shortages had led to reduced maintenance schedules. The chain link that failed had apparently been stressed beyond its tolerance, potentially due to the ride's mechanism being operated at higher speeds than recommended. In the aftermath of the tragedy, Eleanor Carson filed a lawsuit against Manawa Amusement Company, which was settled out of court in December 1942. The terms were never made public, but the settlement reportedly provided financial support for the young widow and her children. The boat ride was permanently closed following the accident, and the incident led to stricter safety regulations for amusement rides throughout the Midwest. Perhaps the most poignant twist to this tragedy came from the subsequent investigation, which revealed that Robert Carson had actually volunteered for naval service just 2 weeks before his death. His enlistment papers, found among his personal effects, showed he was scheduled to report for basic training on July 28, 1942. In a cruel irony, the man who would never get to serve his country on the waters of war became a victim of recreational waters close to home. Robert Carson's death led to significant changes in water safety practices. The Nebraska and Iowa state legislatures both passed laws in 1943 requiring life preservers to be worn by all passengers on commercial water rides, legislation informally known as Carson's Law. Additionally, amusement park rides became subject to monthly safety inspections, with particular attention to metal fatigue and structural integrity. Today, nearly 8 decades later, Lake Manawa still attracts visitors seeking recreation. But the boat ride that claimed Robert Carson's life exists only in the memories of the oldest residents and in the archives of the Pottawatomie County Historical Society. A small plaque near the former boat launch commemorates the accident and serves as a reminder of how one tragedy can lead to safer conditions for generations to follow. This is the last photo of Michael Reynolds, taken just 15 minutes before disaster struck. Imagine, a sunny afternoon at the fair turns into a nightmare when a mechanical failure causes a ride's speed to spiral out of control, pinning passengers against metal with 3 times the force of gravity. Michael was like any other 16-year-old in the summer of '68. The eldest son of Walter and Elizabeth Reynolds, he was spending his vacation helping his father at their family hardware store in Houston, Texas. The tall, lanky teen with a mop of brown hair had dreams of becoming an engineer. His fascination with mechanics made him particularly excited about the new amusement park that had just opened across town. June 15, 1968 was meant to be a perfect day. Astroworld had opened just 2 weeks earlier, and the Reynolds family decided to visit the park as a reward for Michael's excellent grades that year. His younger sister Carla, 12, had brought her Kodak Instamatic camera, eager to document their adventure. They arrived just after lunch, the Texas sun blazing overhead, as they navigated through the crowds. The photo shows Michael standing in line for The Happening, one of the park's newest attractions in the Maudeville section. You can see his excitement, the slight smile, the way he's leaning forward, eager to experience the thrill of the ride. In the background, you can make out the distinctive shape of the ride's arms and carriages, already spinning with passengers. Michael's mother would later recall how he'd been particularly fascinated by this ride, explaining to his sister how the double-axis rotation created the intense centrifugal force. At 3:17 p.m., Michael and 2 friends boarded the ride, taking their seats in the red carriage near the outer edge. The operator, a college student working his summer job, checked their restraints. A simple lap bar that locked into place. The ride began its cycle normally, with the main arm rotating counterclockwise while the clustered carriages spun clockwise. What no one knew was that the ride had developed a critical flaw. A safety valve designed to regulate hydraulic pressure had begun to fail earlier that day. As the ride accelerated, witnesses reported hearing an unusual grinding noise. Then, at approximately 3:22 p.m., something gave way. "It started spinning faster than I'd ever seen before," recalled Sarah Miller, who was watching from nearby. "People were screaming, but not the fun kind of screaming. You could tell something was wrong." The ride's speed continued to increase, with the centrifugal force building to dangerous levels. Riders were pinned against the sides of their carriages, unable to move. Michael, positioned on the outer edge of the carriage, was exposed to the highest forces. Park employees frantically tried to shut down the ride, but the emergency stop button failed to halt the machinery. It would take nearly 2 full minutes, an eternity for those trapped on the ride, before technicians could cut power to the entire section. When emergency responders finally reached the passengers, they found Michael unconscious, having suffered severe internal injuries from the extreme G-forces. Despite immediate medical attention, he never regained consciousness and was pronounced dead at Memorial Hermann Hospital at 5:43 p.m. What makes this tragedy even more devastating is that it could have been prevented. The investigation revealed that the maintenance crew had noted issues with the hydraulic system the previous day, but had deemed them within acceptable parameters. The safety valve that failed had been scheduled for replacement the following week. The accident led to significant changes in amusement ride safety regulations. Within a year, Texas had implemented new standards requiring redundant safety systems and more frequent inspections for all rides involving centrifugal force. The specific model of hydraulic valve used in the happening was recalled nationwide. For the Reynolds family, no safety improvement could bring back their son. Elizabeth Reynolds would later become an outspoken advocate for amusement park safety, testifying before state legislators and helping to form one of the first consumer advocacy groups focused on ride safety. Michael loved these rides because he understood the science behind them, his father said in a newspaper interview a year after the accident. He would have wanted others to be able to enjoy them safely. Today, modern scrambler rides include multiple redundant safety systems, automatic cutoff switches that activate at specific thresholds, and computerized monitoring that would have prevented the cascade of failures that claimed Michael's life that summer day in 1968. As we look at this last photo, a teenager excited about science and engineering, moments before tragedy, we're reminded of how his story helped change an industry. The next time you buckle into a ride at your local fair, remember that many of the safety features protecting you exist because of lessons learned from accidents like this one. This is the last photo of Elizabeth Betty Collins, taken just 30 minutes before the catastrophe. Imagine a warm summer evening, the carnival lights twinkling against the darkening sky, and a 22-year-old woman smiling with excitement, unaware that the metal cable holding her swing would snap and send her plummeting to her death. Betty Collins was the second daughter of Richard and Marie Collins, a respected middle-class family from Riverdale, Ohio. Those who knew her described her as vivacious and ambitious. She had graduated from Riverdale High School in 1954 with honors, and had been working as a secretary at the local insurance office while saving money to attend college. Her dream was to become a teacher, inspired by her beloved third-grade teacher who had helped her overcome a childhood stutter. Betty was engaged to Thomas Harrington, a young mechanic she had met at a church social 2 years prior. They had set their wedding date for October 4th, 1958, just 3 months after that fateful July evening. July 12th, 1958 had started like any ordinary Saturday. Betty had spent the morning helping her mother with housework and writing thank you notes for engagement gifts. That afternoon, Thomas picked her up in his newly polished 1952 Chevrolet. They had been planning this outing for weeks. The Summerfest traveling carnival had arrived in town, and Betty loved the excitement of carnival rides. According to Thomas's later testimony, Betty had been particularly eager to try the Starflyer swing ride, which had been advertised as the carnival's newest attraction. The Starflyer was a chain swing ride manufactured by Wichita Metal Products in 1956. It featured 12 swings suspended by steel cables from a central rotating mechanism. The ride operated by spinning the seated passengers in a circular motion while gradually raising them higher off the ground. At full extension, riders would be approximately 20 feet in the air, experiencing both centrifugal force and the sensation of flight. The ride had been inspected just 3 days before the carnival opened in Riverdale, with no reported issues. At approximately 7:45 p.m., Betty and Thomas bought their tickets for the Starflyer. According to 3 separate witness accounts, Betty was assigned to swing number 8, while Thomas took swing number 9, directly behind her. A photograph recovered from Thomas's camera shows Betty smiling broadly just before boarding, her dark hair tied back with a red scarf, wearing a light blue summer dress. This would be the last image ever taken of her. The ride began normally, with the operator, 19-year-old Samuel Tucker, controlling the speed and elevation. Witnesses reported that the ride had completed approximately 2 minutes of its 3-minute cycle when a sharp metallic snap echoed through the carnival grounds. According to the subsequent investigation, one of the primary suspension cables on the central mechanism had fractured due to metal fatigue, causing Betty's individual swing cable to detach from the central hub. Betty plummeted approximately 18 feet to the ground below. Unlike modern swing rides, the Starflyer of 1958 had no safety netting and operated over a hard-packed dirt surface. The impact caused severe head trauma and internal injuries. 3 carnival goers with medical training, Nurse Ellen Whitman, Army medic Frank Doherty, and veterinarian Dr. Harold Simpson, rushed to provide emergency assistance. Despite their efforts, Betty never regained consciousness. By the time the ambulance arrived 12 minutes later, she had no detectable pulse. She was pronounced dead upon arrival at Riverdale Memorial Hospital at 8:42 p.m. The investigation that followed revealed a critical oversight. The primary cables had shown visible signs of rust and wear that had been painted over during routine maintenance. According to maintenance records obtained during the subsequent lawsuit, the ride operator, Summerfest Attractions, Inc., had been advised by the manufacturer to replace all central hub cables every 200 operating hours. At the time of the accident, the Starflyer had accumulated over 340 hours without replacement. Perhaps the most chilling detail emerged from Thomas's testimony. He recalled Betty turning back toward him just moments before the cable snapped, mouthing the words, "I love this," her final communication. Thomas himself suffered minor injuries when his swing collided with another during the emergency stop, but was released from the hospital the following day. The accident led to significant changes in carnival safety regulations. In 1959, Ohio became one of the first states to implement mandatory daily inspections of all amusement rides, with particular emphasis on metal fatigue in load-bearing components. The Collins Law, as it became known locally, required all swing rides to operate over impact-absorbing surfaces and with safety netting. Betty's funeral was attended by over 300 people from the Riverdale community. Thomas Harrington never married, devoting himself instead to advocating for amusement ride safety. In 1962, he established the Betty Collins Memorial Scholarship, which still provides funding for one Riverdale High School graduate each year. The Starflyer ride was immediately decommissioned following the accident, though variations of chain swing rides continue to operate at carnivals today, now with multiple redundant safety systems. The spot where Betty fell is marked by a small memorial plaque at what is now Riverdale Community Park. What if the maintenance crew had replaced those cables on schedule? What if Betty had chosen a different swing? What if she had decided to try the Ferris wheel instead? These questions haunt the Riverdale community to this day, a somber reminder that even moments of joy can turn to tragedy in an instant. This is the last photo of Sarah Miller, just 15 minutes before the 1945 Paradise Park teacup ride disaster claimed 3 lives and injured 7 others. Imagine, you're watching your children laugh as they spin in colorful teacups, never suspecting that in moments, a catastrophic mechanical failure will turn a summer afternoon into a nightmare that would change amusement park safety forever. It was July 17, 1945, a Tuesday that should have been ordinary. World War II was winding down, and Americans were finally allowing themselves small pleasures again. Paradise Park, located just outside Chicago, had reopened the previous summer after being closed during the early war years. Their newest attraction was the whirling teacups, a ride featuring 6 oversized teacups that spun on individual axes while the entire platform rotated. Sarah Miller, a 32-year-old war widow, had brought her children James, 8, and Elizabeth, 6, to celebrate her son's birthday. The family had saved ration stamps for weeks to afford this special outing. Sarah's sister, Margaret Thompson, took the now infamous photograph of the 3 smiling in front of the ride, Sarah's arm protectively around her children. They appear carefree, their faces bright with anticipation. "My mother had splurged on our tickets," James Miller recalled in a 1975 interview with the Chicago Tribune. "She kept saying how much we deserved a day of fun after everything we'd been through losing Dad at Normandy. I remember being so excited to ride the teacups. They were the park's newest attraction." According to witness statements and later court documents, the whirling teacups had been operating for approximately 3 hours that day when riders began noticing unusual vibrations. Henry Carson, the ride operator, later testified that he had reported concerning noises to his supervisor earlier that morning, but was told to keep it running, as the park was especially busy. At 2:17 p.m., as the ride reached its maximum speed with 18 passengers aboard, the main central axis, a solid steel shaft responsible for rotating the entire platform, catastrophically failed. Metallurgical analysis would later reveal that improper manufacturing, combined with wartime metal shortages, had resulted in substandard materials being used. "It sounded like a bomb went off," recalled Dorothy Williams, who was waiting in line with her husband. "The entire platform seemed to lift and then crash down, and the teacups just flew apart. People were screaming and children were crying. I'll never forget the sound of metal tearing." The failure sent the platform and individual teacups crashing into each other at high speed. The Miller family's teacup was among the most severely impacted, as it was closest to the center axis. Sarah Miller was killed instantly when the heavy central machinery collapsed, while 7-year-old Elizabeth suffered severe head trauma and died 3 days later at County Hospital. James Miller survived with a broken arm and leg, primarily because his mother had instinctively shielded him with her body. Another passenger, 45-year-old Franklin Harris, also died from injuries sustained when he was thrown from his teacup and struck the surrounding metal railings. In total, 3 people died and 7 others were seriously injured. Among the injured was Carson, the ride operator, who suffered severe lacerations trying to reach trapped passengers. The investigation that followed revealed a perfect storm of negligence that made the accident almost inevitable. The ride had been hastily manufactured during wartime material shortages, with key components made from recycled metals that didn't meet safety specifications. Maintenance records showed that warning signs, unusual vibrations, grinding noises, and excessive wobbling had been reported multiple times, but were ignored by management who were eager to keep their newest attraction running during the profitable summer season. Most damning, Paradise Park had skipped the usual safety inspections in their rush to open the new attraction. The lawsuit that followed, Miller v. Paradise Amusements, became a landmark case that fundamentally changed amusement park regulations across the United States. The accident's aftermath was far-reaching. Chicago and then Illinois passed the first comprehensive amusement ride safety legislation in the nation, requiring regular inspections, proper maintenance documentation, and quality control standards. These regulations became the model for similar laws adopted across the country in the following decade. For the survivors, the scars remained. James Miller was raised by his Aunt Margaret and struggled with survivor's guilt throughout his life. "I've always wondered why my mother and sister died while I lived," he said in that same 1975 interview. "Every time I see a teacup ride, I feel sick to my stomach." Paradise Park never recovered from the scandal and financial damages. It closed permanently in 1947, though the property remained abandoned until the 1960s, when it was finally demolished to make way for a shopping center. The whirling disaster, as newspapers called it, became a sobering reminder of the importance of safety regulations and proper maintenance. In the decades that followed, amusement park rides became subject to increasingly stringent safety standards, with the teacup ride specifically requiring reinforced central axles, secondary safety systems, and mandatory stress testing. Today, a small memorial plaque stands on the former site of Paradise Park, acknowledging the lives lost and the safety measures born from tragedy. The accident remains one of the deadliest amusement park failures of the 1940s, and a turning point in how Americans approached recreational safety.